Oh, we're live.
Okay, well, we're live.
I didn't time that on purpose. Well, we're live. It is Wednesday. It's 7 p.m. And that means it's time for quarantine Q&A.
Yes, we're back. Last week was a hit, and we're hoping to bring you another hit that's near and dear to my heart. Like, I love this subject because being in the mental health field, it's about mental health has been known to be something that pushes an agenda, and it's not necessarily always the right one. In mental health, prior to a lot of our early innovations, it was about the moral model, which, we'll get more into tonight, where people were kind of pushing this agenda versus like the overall wellness of the person. I'm so happy that we get to tell you more about that. Alicia, I mean, I was so profound with some of the stuff you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, so we'll definitely just jump right in. Oh, one of the things that we're obviously going to be talking about harm reduction. That's our topic today. And as I was kind of Googling, looking up just sort of addiction facts, CDC addiction facts, I was just really surprised by the amount of things that came up that only had to do with overdoses. Just like tons of articles, tons of pages only, with overdose. And it got me thinking, well, why are we just addressing the issue when it becomes such a big problem? Why are we not talking about the start of this? Why are we only talking about deaths? How did we get from point A to point Z so quickly? And why are we not doing anything about, what happens in the middle? So something that, community leaders and different states are doing now to combat that exact issue is syringe access programs and syringe service programs. So we're gonna just kind of briefly glaze over them before we start into the meat and potatoes of the night, just so everyone has kind of like a basic kitchen table understanding of them. So syringe access programs and exchange programs can be any host of things or mix of all of these things that we're going to talk about. But normally it's, the distribution of clean needles for people that are going to be injecting intravenous drugs. And then sometimes it's also, giving out the clean needles, but also facilitating the removal of needles that are used. And then it can also be, to take it a step further, can be different clean injection sites where people can go to be, in a safe environment where they're not going to be arrested, or, where there's not going to be just frankly dirt and things like that around, so that they can have, a safe experience if they are choosing to do that. And then to take it even a step further, when we get into more programs, we can have different kind of mental health counseling, different kind of social help, housing, things like that. We can have screening and access to care for HIV, viral hepatitis, different kind of STIs. We can have overdose education and education about how to more safely inject yourself if you are going to be doing that. Vaccines for hepatitis A and B, lots of different ways that we can incorporate, community resources to help people that are using drugs. So there's, like with anything, everything sounds great, well, why don't we have this everywhere? There's going to be roadblocks in the way. And a lot of those kind of stem from a societal standpoint, where people are thinking, well, we shouldn't be doing this, and, different politicians and things like that. But also the fact that federal funding is not always allowed to be, used for the purchase of something that would explicitly be used for illicit drug use. So with that being said, though, there are an insane amount of benefits to these programs. Mainly, and most importantly, I think that people that are in syringe exchange programs or syringe access programs are 5 times more likely to be in treatment eventually at some point in their life, so which is a huge number. And then we also have the reduction in infections that are related to intravenous drug use. And just for scope, last year the United States spent $700 million to treat infections that are related to intravenous drug use, which is a lot of money. So obviously, if we can curb those infections, before they start, that's, Great. And then lastly, you know, there was 1,000 reverse overdose deaths in a program in Miami last year alone, just by, you know, the distribution of Narcan. So that is a crazy figure to me, and just something that obviously we can strive for and better. So,
And, you know, one thing I want to add to what you're saying to paint a picture for the audience is that, you know, we're thinking about, like Alicia said, the end effect, right? A lot of these issues stem from childhood, background, socioeconomic status. If you come from a background of, let's say, drugs and alcohol, where that was what you used to, what you're exposed to, right? And that's all you know, we have to understand as a people that there has to be intervention and prevention at multiple levels, not just at the end, not at the brink of death. But if we want to be pro-life with all of our stances in lifting and elevating the higher qualities of life, we need to start intervention and prevention like day one of a substance issue, not day the end.
Yeah, absolutely. So that, you know, going forward, I don't want to waste any time. So we're going to bring on our amazing guests. I'm so excited to have them on today. So,
Me too. So I love both of these people who are coming on. So get ready for Calvin and Scott.
we're so excited to have y'all.
Yay.
Hey everybody. Hey everybody. I want to thank you both, Alicia and PJ, for having us. Both honored.
Thank you.
Yeah, so if you guys want to take it away, introduce yourselves and maybe go through a little bit about your story and you know, your path.
Sure. My name's Calvin once again, and Scott and I flipped the coin to see who's going to go first, and I just a little bit about my background, and I'll go very general and quick because, you know, I'm 53 years old. There's a whole lot of stuff in between we don't have enough time for, so I'm going to try to make it as quick as I can, but also be thorough. I'm the youngest out of 5 kids. There's me, and then the oldest was 13 years when I was born. So there's quite a bit of an age gap. She was like the second mom to me growing up. And I came from an alcoholic home. Alcohol was allowed in the house. There's a lot of parties at the house. I can't remember my first drink, but I was old enough where I was about that tall on a table where I could sit. And there was 2 handles always on a table at parties, ashtrays, beer cans all the way around, you know. So I would go by and take a nip out of everybody's can. And I remember they'd think it's funny me walking to bed, you know, I'm kind of staggering a little bit. And I don't remember how that felt then, but I do remember my first drunk. And I was 7 years old. It was at my sister's wedding. And the first time I smoked weed, I was 8. After that, about 9, I started taking Valiums. Back in the day, all the mothers used to have Valiums in their cabinet, you know.
Wow.
Mothers, they used to call them Mother's Little Helper.
Oh my goodness.
See my brothers picking at them, and I'd pick at them. And, you know, and I advanced ahead a little bit. I was talking to a childhood friend about a month ago. And he brought up a memory that I totally forgot. I was in the 6th grade, and I used to get these, they're called barbiturates, right? And thank God they're not out in the market much anymore. Just a couple low dose type things treat seizures. But, you know, I was taking barbiturates in the 6th grade. Me and this girl, she weighed about 80 pounds. She was my running buddy. She cut you in a minute too. Her and I were tight, and, you know, I went to a parochial school, and the nun asked her, "What's wrong with your legs?" You know, she goes, "I don't know. My legs won't move right," you know, and that was so funny. He remembered it, you know. So I had a pretty wild childhood, and I decided that I was going to get out of there. I just wanted to leave, and the best way I knew to go, I figured out if I joined the military, I could get out of here. They're going to pay for it. you know, so I joined the Air Force. And I was like, and I remember flying on a plane, going into my first duty station. And I was like, I'm going to go around, I'm going to surround myself with good people. Well, within 24 hours, I found my people, and they were the drinkers. And so throughout my life in the military, I was going to be a 30-year guy, retire. I almost made it 4 years, but I finally got discharged for failure to rehabilitate. I could not stay sober. Every time I turned around, I was going for a promotion. I get busted for something, and it was always alcohol related. And in time, when I got discharged, I was running aimlessly. I didn't know which way to turn, where to go. I followed the Grateful Dead for a while and all their parties. That was a lot of fun. I don't regret that part. But anyways, I lived,
trip it's been.
yeah, fortunately I lived through it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're both sitting here talking to you guys in our living room is a true miracle. But anyway, I was living in a condemned house with a couple of guys using buckets to flush the toilet out and taking a bath in the neighbor's pool at midnight or 3 a.m. It was pretty bad. And I was introduced to AA, but I was in and out for all my life. And it finally got to the point where it was bad enough where I took it serious, and I started doing a few things that the program teaches us. And it's a progressive disease. I believe it to be a disease, and it progresses. I stayed sober for I don't know, about a year. And when I went back this time, I discovered crack cocaine. I used to freebase in the 80s and 90s, right? And freebase was like socially acceptable. You sit around some people, you're snorting, you're like, hey, want a little kick? Let's mix some ether with it. Poof.
Oh my goodness.
Oh man. So you fast forward to 2011, I'm smoking crack, and I'm like, that's a dark drug, man. This isn't something like you'd sit around with your buddies and do a line with on a coffee table. This is, I'm going to sit in the corner in the dark and do my thing. Fortunately, I got sober, and I stayed sober for 6 years. Through Scott and I's relationship, we met in rooms of AA, but through our relationship, about a year and a half ago, I had a relapse. And
It's 6 years sober.
It's 6 years sober. And it was quick as far as with my mind. I don't want to talk too much more, but thank God I found my way back. I had a lot of people around me encouraging me. I knew that our relationship wouldn't withstand that for much longer.
Mhm.
I go to the gutter pretty quick, and I got a good life. I don't want to screw that up. So
Yeah.
yes. So thanks. I'm going to stop there.
Thanks, Calvin.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Calvin.
That was very honest, transparent, upfront about your experiences. I just want to say thank you, and
Yeah.
Scott, please take it away.
Thank you, guys. Thanks again. I already thank you guys, but thanks again for having us. So I'll just share, in a brief way, what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. And, and I share my sobriety date, January 31st, 2014.
Yay.
And I share that because I started drinking regularly at 15, and by the age of 16, I was introduced to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. That was in 1986 when I was 16. So, there was some intervention happening in my teens, and I just wasn't ready. So like I said, I started drinking regularly at 15. I didn't know it at the time, but a switch was flipped in my life that night. I left the house of one person, and I returned to my parents' house another person. I had no idea, that my life was about to change, and it changed drastically. In some treatment centers and things, they talk about an imaginary line. Somewhere along the line, people cross an imaginary line. Where up to that line, they could have stopped, if they had known any better, or did stop. I believe there was no imaginary line for me. I drank to the fullest. You know, I started smoking pot at the same time. I had consequences right away. Like my life was affected. Everyone's life in my life was affected. My school life was affected. You know, most people don't have consequences right away, but I'm definitely one of them that did. I moved out of high school. I moved down south and became a bartender. You know, every alcoholic wants to become a bartender, and that's what I did. You know, and I always say that, you know, again, I crossed that imaginary line about the age of 20. I was drinking heavy. The drugs were getting heavier. Things were getting worse in my life. But again, there was no imaginary line. You know, I identify as an alcoholic. I attend AA meetings. If I go to an NA meeting, I identify as an addict. I'm definitely an addict. I'm the type of person that if you put a drink in me, anything else at all you put in front of me, I'm going to do. There's no switch to me, you know. And again, not just same story for most people, but again, it just progressively got worse. I believe what Calvin said. I do believe now today that it is a disease. It's progressive. It's fatal. And it's also treatable, you know, and I see that today. I had 4 DUIs. My last DUI, I was looking at 5 years prison. Fourth DUI was a felony. I was looking at 5 years prison, and I couldn't stop drinking. I had no choice in the matter when it came to the end. The last 10 years of my drinking and using, you know, I started having DT so bad that I learned about the drink. We call it the hair of the dog. Most people call it the hair of the dog. Alcohol is called the next drink. You know, for the most part, the rest of that 10 years, I lived under the influence of alcohol to prevent DTs and seizures and things like that. AA is not the only way to get sober. I know people get sober in other ways. It's worked for the two of us. We've also been to NA meetings. Like I said, we could identify as an addict. I can identify as a sex addict. You know, wherever room I'm in, I can identify. Getting sober has changed my life. You know, you guys have only known me sober. I was a different person 6 years ago. And I truly believe that sobriety has changed my life for sure. You know, one more thing, you know, we're talking about, you know, the needle exchange program in harm reduction. You know, one of the last times I had a relapse, I met someone in NA and I relapsed with them. And in a blackout, I was shooting meth. And I had always said I'd never stick a needle in my arm. And then when I got sobered up the next day or two, then I'm freaking out. Did I share a needle with this person? I know HEP C. I know they have history of syphilis. Did I you know? So luckily there were clean needles there.
Yeah.
I didn't use a clean needle on me. I don't have any history with heroin, but I definitely have history with most that there are.
Yeah. And, you know, that I think that's like just it's so important that there are clean needles around people, you know, for people that are using, because your story could have ended, or not ended, but have, you know, been so different following those events if there wasn't, you know. And it's all about mitigating those risks. You know, how many of those things can we take off the table, you know, or change, really.
Yes. So one of the things too, when you were saying, Scott, about an imaginary line and things like that, you know, with my social work background, what we've kind of learned through working with individuals living with addiction is there's several factors, right? Like how you were raised and conditioned. That's a big one. How you deal with stress and trauma. That's another big one. Your relationships. Are your relationships a source of strength and power, or are they places that you're just stressed about all the time? What's your environment doing for you? How is beers and alcohol and drugs being accessible, encouraging an addiction? So it's like when you're working with like when I'm working with an individual who's like living with an addiction and they're telling me these things, some of these things are like indicators. I'm like, bing, 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 bing. There's so many things versus like an individual who didn't have access to value, didn't have access, you know, like I was very much likely also to be an alcoholic because my dad laughed and my family laughed as they put alcohol near me, right? So thank God I wasn't raised in that household. Had I been there more, that environment could have impacted my life way worse in a way.
Right. Absolutely.
So I appreciate both of you for telling me that and painting a picture for the audience, because they need to understand behind every addiction there is a story, and that story is important.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's not just A to Z, right?
Exactly.
There's so much that happens in between, and that's so. Yeah, I mean that is kind of the story of harm reduction as a whole. So let's jump into our first question, which is phrased to both of you. What is harm reduction to you? Like in your own words, how would you describe that, or what is it to you personally?
With me, I guess I'll go first. Harm reduction. I think right along the lines of what PJ, I was listening intently to what he was saying. I was in counseling at a young age while going through my addiction. I was still drinking. Had no intention on stopping, but I'll tell them had every intention on stopping. I was having a good time. Why quit? So thought I was having a good time. So that was implanted in me at a young age, probably 19.
Counseling.
And it started making me question, am I a dog? Am I an alcoholic? Am I an addict? That followed through my life, where I used to question when I couldn't get off the floor and I'm trying to stand up, waking up on the floor. So these things would play in my mind, but I'd supplant them, push them back down.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe that's part of harm reduction. I do. Early intervention is key.
Mm-hmm.
Even if a person doesn't stop, it's implanted in their mind, just from my opinion. Then, you have intensive outpatient programs. With an alcoholic, and I will say, people get mad when I say this, but an alcoholic, the only drug you could die from detoxing.
Mm-hmm.
You can't die from a heroin withdrawal.
You feel like you're
dying, but you're not going to die.
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot of opiate withdrawals. I never shot a heroin, but I smoked it, snorted it, but I was on a lot of oxys and roxys and that whole family. Detoxing off then, you feel you got the flu so bad, you're dying. But alcoholism, you can die from a seizure of total withdrawal. It's an ugly thing. So I'll be quiet.
I suffered from seizures. My alcoholism had progressed so hard that I was suffering from seizures. Usually that would stop me. I would say that harm reduction, talking about harm reduction, I mean, along the lines that Calvin's talking about, A to Z, list them all. Definitely, I would say it's just reducing negative consequences, or helping reduce negative consequences.
Yeah.
In this case of what we're talking about tonight, reducing negative consequences due to illegal drugs and legal drugs or alcohol. We were talking about the needle exchange or needle exchange. I call it NEP. I know there's several ways of saying it, but that's only one of them. I mean, Calvin said counseling. Most people need to be physically
removed.
Removed from the drug or the alcohol.
I'm an advocate for somebody that's in that environment. You're surrounded with these people that you think are your friends. They're using influences.
I think what I was going to say was
from that environment.
Medically detox. That's the word I was going for. Medically detox. So once you're detox, the next thing is treatment centers, halfway houses, three-quarter way houses, intensive outpatient care, counseling. Like Calvin said, counseling it's all part of it. It's not just one thing.
Absolutely.
That's harm reduction.
And I think you guys painted a beautiful picture, because it's important that harm reduction be at different steps, right? You have to meet the client where they are, right? So like when I was working in substance abuse with corrections, and I had clients who I knew were lying to me directly in the face. I was like, listen, I'm not God. I'm no one important and no one special, right? So we can have an honest conversation, because what we're talking about is getting you to a place where you want to be. You said with your own words that you're unhappy getting up off the floor or being on the floor. Every time I show you what you're telling me, you don't like hearing it. And so I'm trying to get you to a place where you like hearing what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Like seeing your own actions. And that's the power of counseling, because it's just a mirror from an objective standpoint. So that kind of leads me into my question, which is, people frequently use the argument that if you give people access to clean needles, it means they will use more, to discredit syringe exchange and clean injection sites. What is your response or take on this, Scott? And then
I did a little bit of research on this before coming on, and it looks like all the data and research that I've read, that it all says no. From a scientific standpoint,
no. Yeah.
Big no. I personally think that it's a gray line. It's a thin line. I think for the most part, no. They probably had this topic when birth control came out. Are women can have more sex with birth control? We talk about it a lot with PrEP. Are people have more sex with PrEP?
And condoms.
People having more sex because they're using a condom. I don't believe people are going to use more. I think it's going to be a lot safer, and it can save some lives, whether it's theirs or the people that they're interacting with or coming in contact with after using the drug. So I personally don't believe it's going to promote more myself.
One of the can I go?
Yeah.
One of the times Scott and I, we both have a little history in Daytona Beach, and we're like, the county pumped in a lot of money to make it real nice, and Hilton put up this beautiful hotel, right? And we went down there. Daytona's always been a little seedy, but we went walking on a boardwalk, and I was just blown away, both of us, at a lot of junkies, lack of better terms, a lot of addicts hanging out, doing what they got to do to get a dime. I mean, I could read it in a second. Both of us can. Like, here he is. We know we've been there. And but the point is, I've seen needles in the sand before in Daytona.
Yeah.
Needles on the boardwalk. There's kids running around. And some have a little bit of heroin left in it. They might have got it out when they did it, and with blood on it. I mean, I am totally for needle exchange. I don't believe it's going to promote it. Like the whole thing with even going into a place where they could shoot. There's some kind of supervision to where they don't die. Right. Like you said, all this money they're pumping into treating people, why not shift it over to help them? They're going to do it anyways.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I don't know how like clean injection sites work, or clean safe houses. I don't know how, when I was going through DTs and I walked across the street to 7-Eleven to get a beer to stop those DTs, I didn't come back and find a safe house to do it in. So I don't know how that works when it comes to having a safe place to inject drugs. Am I scoring 1 mile down the road and then then having to find this house? I don't know what happens in between the scoring of the drugs and the actual shooting of the drugs. Like, I don't know how the safe houses work. I know when we were smoking crack, there's crack house. We go to a crack house, or we smoke crack at a crack house. There's shooting ranges, shooting houses that people go.
Yeah.
So I don't know if Alicia, any of your research says anything about, how a clean injection site works.
Well, I think like in general, it's just the idea that someone would have a place to go to, not, necessarily completely evade like getting arrested or anything like that, but just the fact that it's like an actual clean place to go where you're not going to be, potentially sharing needles with people, because say you show up to one of, a place where a bunch of people are shooting needles, you want to have a clean needle, and you don't want a bunch of people around you saying, oh, can I use that after you, or anything like that. So I think it's kind of like, maybe not necessarily always supervised, but at least just if you went there, that you would have access to a clean needle, to a clean place to inject the drugs that you're doing, and also to, Narcan or something like that, should you need it, because you might be overdosing. So I think it's just like clean in a lot of sense of the word. And again, to just like mitigate a lot of the problems that would arise from someone doing that. And obviously we don't want people doing that on the streets, then just leaving the needle on the ground, you know, like Calvin, like you said, a child stepping on it, or, you know, any person doing that. Obviously, that's something that if we can help it, why aren't we doing it? You know, that, yeah. But that's, again, that's another topic to kind of merge into is, you know, how in your experience, or have you seen, you know, just through your addiction journey, how does addiction relate to, you know, hepatitis C, to HIV? And, you know, if you've seen that at all with, you know, the sharing of syringes and things like that, you know, how do you feel like those things are directly linked? Because obviously at the end of the day with Hope and Hope, we're an AIDS service organization. So we want to, you know, talk a little bit about how those things are directly linked to HIV care and to HEP C, et cetera.
Well, of course, we all know if people are sharing needles and exchanging blood-borne blood, you know, the blood-borne viruses like Hep C, HIV, and Hep B, and things like that are definitely going to happen. You know, I think the goal in preventive care or harm reduction care, like getting people into a halfway house or getting people into treatment or getting people into detox, that I know for experience, once I was detoxed and in a treatment center or a halfway house, I was as long as I wasn't using, I was way less apt to be out there spreading HIV or anything else. If I had Hep C, once you know, this is an opportunity to get clean for 6 months to a year so that the treatment options are available to those people. Right. Most insurances and programs require people to be clean about 6 months to a year, you know, before they're going to offer them the Hep C treatment.
Right.
And I talk to a lot of addicts in my work, you know, and I explain to them, it's not like they don't know that us addicts need the treatment the most. It's the fact that if we relapse and we don't adhere to our medications, we're just like HIV drugs. We're no longer, that's no longer an option for us down the road when we are clean and sober. Right. So you want to be clean and sober to adhere to your medications, whether it's HIV, Hep C, hepatitis B, any of those.
Right.
One of the things, especially with Hep C, a lot of people don't think, well, they're like, oh, but I never shot dope. But I've been to treatment centers, I've been to this, I've been to that. And I'm like, well, did you ever snort cocaine? And then they say, yes.
From that too.
I'm like, now we got to talk, you know, because it tears down the membranes. When when I share my straw with somebody else, and they give it back to me, we're sitting there doing an 8-ball. I don't mean to be graphic, but you know, it tears down everything in our membranes, and you bleed.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we share that, and that's a great way to transmit it. When I was in a rehab center up in DeLand, oh my God, what a place that was! But you know, they have 5 people in one room, 5 people in another room, and you share a bathroom. 95% of the guys in there were Department of Corrections. I'd go in there, I would find like 3 razors on the windowsill, right? Yeah. And they're all using them to manscape, right? And I'm like, nope. You know, and I even knew then, number one, it's gross, but number 2, what a breeding ground for hepatitis.
Oh, yeah.
And so, yeah, by educating people in treatment centers and these kind of things, it's a great harm reduction also.
I think if someone's still using it, they're out from experience. When I was out there ripping and running, I was not adhering to my medications. So I think some sort of prevention needs to happen in order to ensure adherence to medications.
Yeah. And so from what I'm hearing with what you guys have been painting from the beginning to now in this conversation, that addiction has a mind of its own. Yes. It has like a subconscious motivation that sometimes, if not many times, take the choice out of your hands.
Yes.
For those individuals that are constantly out here, the naysayers who say addiction is a choice, you chose to do what you're doing, you're choosing the lifestyle in which you're choosing. What do you say to them? How do you educate them to bring them onto our side to understand that addiction is not a choice? Calvin?
You know, I could say, you know, it's a whole thing, even with genetic, environmental, all these things that a lot of times guide me, what guided me into addiction. I'll take my mom for an example. My mom grew up in an alcoholic home. Her parents were hardcore drinkers and moved across the street from a bar so they didn't have to drive. And my mom was like the leader in the family. And, I would see her like at a family party or a family function. Not one time in my life have I ever seen my mom drunk. Never. She would get to about 3 drinks and she'd stop. I'm like, what are you doing? This isn't the norm around here. Her words were, I don't like the way it makes me feel. and I'm like, well, shit, I love the way it makes me feel. That's why I want to keep going. So it was her choice not to go that route. However, she liked to gamble. Her addiction went into another category.
Right.
And she liked to gamble. She'd do the scratch off. She'd go to the casino. That kind of thing. So am one of those, PJ, to answer your question, it's not a choice. If I could have stopped, I would have done it decades ago, but I couldn't. Part of it, and I didn't want to because I liked it, like the effects. But the other part is, like you said, it's like a different entity takes over and it tells me when, and when, where, and how, and why. It answers all the questions for me. So,
I mean, I truly believe that we're bodily, mentally different than other people. I truly believe that. I believe when I put alcohol in my system, something happens to me different than when my sister does, or maybe one of you do. Something happens to me. One, the craving, the phenomena of craving kicks in. It's like I say I'm going to have one, but after I'm having that one, my mind's already telling me, well, you only have a half a pint left. You better go. Like, the physical craving happens. We also have an obsessive mind. I believe that the mind of an alcoholic and addict is also different. And I believe the mind, we obsess. Most people don't obsess. You guys might go out on a Friday night and not think about it to another week or another month. I'm out on a Friday night thinking, when am I going to get some on Saturday and Sunday? Like, I truly believe we're bodily and mentally different. I don't know what sets us apart, whether it's genetic. It could be all of it. It could be genetic. It could be environmental. It can be situational. All those things can create or can create an alcoholic or addict. But I can tell you, and I've said this and we hear it a lot, not many people when they're 10 or 11 years old say, I want to grow up to be an alcoholic or addict. When I had that first drink at 15 and I described like a switch was flipped in me, switch was flipped in me. I was genetically predisposed to when I had that drink that I was going to want another.
Yep.
And I believe that near the end, once your body becomes so physically saturated with a drug or alcohol, you're physically craving it so much, your mind is assessing it. I had no choice. When I got to the point where it's either DT, shaker, or have a seizure or have another drink, I'm going to have another drink.
Right.
Many times I banged on the table, I'm never going to do this again. And then the next day I'm driving into ABC thinking, why in the heck am I doing this? It's like another entity, like PJ described it. It's like something overtakes us where you totally have no control of it. There is no choice. No. Particularly near the end for most people.
I get so mad, not to be grabbing. This is the story of an alcoholic's life, but I'd wake up and I knew I was going to start shaking. I'd start going into the DTs and I'd, see what I had left, what to drink. And if I had a couple beers, I would go in a shower and I would, because I knew I was going to get sick, and I'd start drinking it. That first one would start going down and I'd throw it up and throw up cold beer and then start going down again. And by the time, I'd be shaking so bad and I'm holding on to the bottle like this. And by the time I could get it down, I'd start feeling good again. It's like the Tin Man on The Wizard of Oz. You get a little oil and I start getting all loose and start feeling nice. It's like the day starts again, and But yeah, the one thing I want to say too, I'm allergic to shellfish, right? And I love shellfish. I used to eat shellfish any chance I'd get, shrimp, lobster, scallops. Oh my God, I love it.
Now I'm hungry.
Yep. And I was at this one restaurant and my lips and my tongue blew up. And we're all at the table. And I was like, did anybody else it happen too? They're like, no. And the chef comes over. Oh, can you breathe? Can you breathe? Oh, yeah, I'm good. You know, we're drinking, of course. About 3 weeks go by, I get a Publix ring of shrimp. We're sitting around eating it, and it got worse. Oh, my tongue and everything blew up. That's been about 15 years ago. I've never touched a shrimp again in my life.
He can choose not to eat shrimp.
I could choose not to eat shrimp.
Yeah. So that's something.
But take a drink, though. You know?
But before I, Alicia, before you answer your question, ask your question, I want to make sure that the audience understands that that entity, that subconscious entity that has the ability to take over, that in the beginning, like Scott said in the beginning, with the imaginary line, right? A lot of those factors that pushes us over the line is those feelings of loneliness, how we handle stress, because all of a sudden we're taking a drink just to, or a drug, and we're just getting the edge off. Or we're just stressed, or it's just social. So we're just all of a sudden a part of these things, right? But then, just like Calvin with your mom, 3 drinks. Some individuals are very aware of that line and where it is, but others, because of how they feel and where they come from, it pushes them over the line. They want to feel something. Sometimes you don't want to feel anything at all because of what you're going through.
Yep.
And so I just wanted to say that because a lot of the audience who's maybe watching this may be like, okay, well, it's still a choice, because that's constantly the battle that we as social workers are constantly advocating against, because it's not. That's what I want to say.
It was alcohol and drugs were a solution to all my problems for decades. I couldn't go into it got to where I couldn't go into a store unless I had the right concoction in me. I could not walk into a room of people because I thought I was feeling judged. What are they thinking? What are they saying? What do they feel about me? And it was I couldn't breathe, so I got to take the right amount of Xanax, the right amount of this, or enough drinks to feel it, where I don't care, where I don't feel. That was to change the way I feel.
Yeah.
And I want to say something like this. We're not promoting the 12-step program. That's what's helped save our lives. The first step in every 12-step program is I'm powerless over my addiction. I'm powerless over alcohol. I mean, it's not like I have problems with alcohol. It's I'm powerless. Like the problem with powerlessness and like the lack of choice is, I used to think the power was like a lot of the viewers might be thinking, whether I pick this cup up or not. I pick it up or I don't. It's not powerless. The powerlessness is not whether I pick up the drink. It's what happens to me once I put the drink in me. Once I put the drink in me, I don't know if I'm going to stay home, if I'll go to a bar, if I'll end up in a backseat of a police car, a hospital, jail, crack house, meth house. I have no idea. I'm completely powerless what happens to me once I put that first one in me.
Right.
Completely powerless. I'll end up in Texas.
Yeah. So that's a good, like what Calvin also too, what you were saying about how, you couldn't go into a room of people unless you had A, B, C, D, E, F, G, So how do you, this just for like the final question, how do you feel like societal norms affect people on, their road to recovery, or, how can we be better allies to people that, are not yet in recovery? How can we better help people that are still living, within their active addiction and, maybe not necessarily ready to take the next step towards getting help if that is what they choose to do. And whoever wants to go first.
I feel like not giving up on a person.
Right.
They're not going to stop until they're ready.
Right.
But just to be there for them, to encourage them, to stay with them, one of the biggest things is not to shame them, right. I feel that a lot of these places, like the injection things, it's going to be a lot of positive affirmation. Somebody cares about me.
Mm-hmm.
A junkie thinks that nobody cares. Society doesn't like a junkie.
Right.
So if we start showing care and love by doing that. Of course, there's going to be those that take advantage of it. There's going to be a thing of where they're going to get recovery through that process. So
Yeah.
that's my belief.
You know, and I think talking about how societal norms, directly affect when people stop or decide to stop or just are going to get help.
Right.
Alcohol is legal. Alcohol is called social. It's hard. They don't say now that guy's a drug addict. They say he's a party boy. They don't say, oh, he's shooting meth in the bathroom or smoking crack. They say he's their club drug. He's doing club drug.
He's having fun.
Yeah, he's having fun. I may be an alcoholic, but no, he's just a party boy. So I think like those things, smoking weed. Oh, he just likes to smoke a little weed. How many of us haven't been to a barbecue and someone lit up a joint? It's socially acceptable.
Right.
If I'm smoking crack in the corner or shooting meth or shooting heroin in the corner, it's not a social norm. So I think recognizing some of those things like meth, I don't know, there's like a social norm where things are accepted, and until things are not accepted, like, okay, Scott, you used to like to drink and used to smoke pot and maybe a little coke, but until I became a crack addict or a heroin addict, then I have a problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I felt safe by going into a crack house. I had been to one in a blackout and I don't remember it. I woke up the next day with paraphernalia and a piece of crack in my pocket, and I go, oh, I must have smoked this last night.
Oh boy.
I had to go through my phone to find out where I had been the night before. And so surprisingly, I had the dealer's number and ended up in there one night, and I realized, number one, it was entertaining. I mean, it was thick. What I've seen in these places, but I knew I had enough smarts. If I'm walking to the dope house with $50 in my pocket, I better stay in a dope house. It's a lot safer to stay in there. The people are watching.
Yeah.
If I walk out of the dope house, they know I got some stuff on me, see? So I'd sit there and do it. So as crazy as it sounds, it's safer to stay in there than it is. Anyway.
Yeah, I think you have to read I think you have to read the room, right? We take a lot away from individuals that are living with substance use and addiction background, or let's say other lifestyle choices that are not considered commonplace. We have a lot of resilience to us as individuals, and we learn how to put our wellness above other things. And so a lot of people just feel like they don't know what they're doing. They're under a drug, but sometimes people work that, like what you're saying is, I read the room. This was my safety plan. This is how I stayed safe. This was a way. You may not agree with it, but this is my way.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah.
So I just want to say a couple more things.
Yes.
Get closer to the end. Another thing about how can you be better allies, just remember that relapse is part of recovery. Everyone needs to have a relapse, but understanding it's part of it. Most people are going to stumble and fall. You fall 10 times, you get up 11 times.
Yeah.
Part of it. I don't believe that addiction is a matter of willpower or not. I have great willpower when it comes to most things in life, so except for those alcohol. And
Yeah.
I'll say something to PJ, to you about counseling. We said, counseling is one of those part of harm reduction. How many times I've sat in treatment centers and out at the smoke pit or somewhere, and we're talking, I don't know how that, they're all saying, I don't know how that counselor could help me. He's not an alcoholic, or he's not a drunk. He's never shot meth. He doesn't know anything about me. I had a counselor probably 15 years ago, and I still remember her saying this to me. She said, Scott, she says, I may not be an alcoholic. I may not be HIV positive, but you don't know why I'm in the work that I'm in. Maybe I grew up in an alcoholic home. Maybe I have an alcoholic sister. Maybe I have a son who died of AIDS. We don't know why people are in the work that they're in. They're there to help us. And I think remembering that counselors don't have to have the same shared experience in order to help guide and support us.
I have a really good counselor now. He's real cool, and the one I had before him, he was awesome, and both doctors, and they're not alcoholics, but it's their compassion, their calling they know, and they guide me into, oh, you ought to read this book. And it's helpful, you know, and it's a gift being a counselor. You know, I cherish more people to even be in that field. I'm glad like PJ going that route. You know, we need that.
Yeah.
That's
a thankless job, as they say.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, and I love it. And I mean, there's often things that in the role when people are bearing their soul to you, you know, we're prepared for those things. You know, we understand that by you tearing me down as an individual, that's a part of your defense mechanism to keep your addiction, right? Your addiction now takes on an ability to thrive.
Absolutely.
Your trauma, your pain, everything that goes on becomes this entity itself that we are so used to, we have to keep it. Sometimes it's harder to move on and grow and evolve than to actually look at our trauma, face it, and overcome it. Sometimes the beast that we don't know is better than the beast that we do. Yes. You know, so, you know, but sometimes we got to just move on. And that's the power of counseling. You know, it shows you the things that you want to see, hopefully.
Yes.
And so as we close the night, you know, I wanted to just close out my closing thoughts, and everyone can give their closing thoughts so that our audience can take away what they want to hear. So what would you guys want to leave the audience with tonight?
That's a beautiful thing. You know, it's a beautiful thing. I number one, I never thought I'd be doing this kind of thing. You know, I honestly, like Scott, thought I was going to die a drunk. You know, and I had all these voids in my life, and I try to fill it with anything I could buy, material, every drug, every this, trying to fill these voids. And I don't have everything I used to have before my life, but I want to trade what I have now for my old life any day. You know, I'm at peace. I could lay my head down on a pillow at night and be at peace. You know, I was suicidal for years and had attempts. It doesn't enter my mind anymore. And that's a beautiful gift, you know.
That's where counseling comes in.
That's where counseling comes
in. You know, I think most addicts and people are really struggling with suicidal thoughts or attempts and depression. You know, I think it starts with counseling for sure. I'm glad to know that we have I keep saying needle exchange program coming to Orlando or here in Orlando. You know, that we have things like Narcan. I'm glad that we have medications like Vivitrol, you know, opioid blocker for heroin and also alcoholics. You know, I mean, we just say science hasn't done so, but it, you know, it may do something.
Hasn't done it, but it might in the future.
Yeah, you know, I believe that in the age of knowledge. Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Yeah. Alicia?
Yeah. Well, you know, I'm just happy that we can have these discussions that will, you know, like we said before, hopefully lead to, you know, an advancement. You know, we finally got the needle exchange, and I know that that's going to be huge, you know, for community members here, and just looking forward to hopefully implementing that, hopefully at Hope and Help, because I just think like the good that it can do is just truly incredible. So thank you guys for being so vulnerable. That's, you know, it's such a blessing to hear, you know, these stories and to, you know, be part of this discussion, because it really does, you know, help so many people to hear the experiences from other people, especially from other people that have come out the other side. You know, like that's priceless. You can't get that anywhere else.
Yep, that's true.
And I want to say, as a child of several generations of alcohol and drug use within my family, from both my mother and my father's side, I really appreciate your honesty, your vulnerability, and everything like that, because I've seen firsthand when individuals are struggling with addiction and refuse to get help, refuse to make change, refuse to even look at themselves, or like, it's like, you're hitting me, you're hurting me, you're abusing me, but yet, and it's affecting our relationship, but still you want to keep using the addiction, you know, like it's still a part of it. So I just really appreciate your vulnerability and how you like impacted people around you and where you're going. And I could go on forever just praising y'all, because I love it and I really appreciate it.
And you know, if I could say this real quick, I know it's harder for a person to change as they get older. There's a point in our life, and we just made the cut pretty much. But you know, a person doesn't. It's a lot of work that has to go in, and the peeling of the onion thing. When a person gets in their 60s, they're like, F it, you know. And it's like, I've been doing it for too long. It's like, let it ride, and you know, fortunate that it started beforehand, before we reach that mark. So
yeah. So I mean, what I'll say is, as we go out, audience, remember that every day there's possibilities for change. We as a company here at Hope and Help are definitely a resource. And feel free to share this information. We will hopefully be getting involved with the needle exchange. I'll leave that to Alicia. She's been the person guiding light on this in a lot of ways. So
good. I want to be involved with you.
Oh, yes, of course.
And Scott and Calvin, please keep up with them in the community. Game changers. They've touched my life in more ways than another. I love their honest stories, and I hope you loved hearing it tonight. So we really appreciate you, audience, for watching. And Calvin and Scott, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Good night, guys.
bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you so much.